All right. Well, Nate, thank you so much for doing this.
Thanks you, Max.
Yeah, absolutely love the show, and I thought you were absolutely fantastic in it. So congratulations first and foremost.
Thanks, man.
So how familiar were you with the story of Major Robert Rosie Rosenthal before you joined the series?
I was not I wasn't aware of his story. I had heard of the Mighty Eighth and a little bit of the 100th Bomb Group, but I didn't know who Robert Rosenthal was until I came across the script and then of course looked into the book that Don Miller wrote that the series is based on. Um, he was an amazing man. And I was really excited to and really honored that they let me play him.
And did you do a lot of research on Rosie and the 100 Bomb Group once you were cast in the series?
Yeah, a couple of us, there we're lucky insofar as there was, video interviews with a couple of these guys. I mean, Rosie passed away a number of years ago, but his son Dan, who I actually got a chance to meet, did a couple of interviews with him in the '90s, and I could see those, and the kind of the best thing about those sorts of things is you don't just learn about sort of his life and his life during the war, and the missions that he flew and what got him there, but he also talks just in these kind of like little moments about his family and about growing up in Brooklyn. And you get I felt like I was able to kind of sink my teeth into a little bit deeper than maybe if I hadn't had those as resources. And then the show itself was so detailed as just as a project. So I remember like showing up on like one of the first days to one of the studios. There's an entire wing of this warehouse that was just like antique like paraphernalia from the war, like the actual stuff like around you could just kind of walk through and soak up. So I mean, everyone was bringing so much to this. There was so much research, and because it's relatively recent history, there's just so much to read and to watch and to listen to and to literally put your hands on.
And it is a very massive production for a television show. Like it's pretty massive, the set pieces and everything. Did it feel a little daunting to sort of step into that world?
It actually it has it almost has the opposite effect of making it feel a little more you feel a little more embraced because you feel that much more immersed in the situation. Um, they're like some people sort of have asked about kind of like is there something daunting about sort of like the responsibility of stepping into that world and stepping into the lives of these men, obviously these great heroes. And for us, the task is kind of like they're none of these men thought of themselves as heroes, right? They were just guys trying to get back in the plane and win a war. And there was this kind of the responsibility component of it, like actually felt very propulsive and not so much. It didn't spark too much fear.
Did you have any discussions with showrunner John Orloff and how you were going to approach the character's arc throughout the show?
Yeah, John spent over a decade preparing to write this and research it. I mean, he talk about like I mentioned like the wing of the warehouse in the studio. He had like a wing in his house where he had like all these guys, like their faces up and like I imagine that I haven't been there, but I imagine like a red string connecting the dots between them on all these different missions and stuff. So he's, in addition to being just such a devoted and brilliant storyteller, he's also like a terrific resource as an actor because he's so in the world of these guys and has been for so many years. I mean, going back to Band of Brothers. So um, that's just one of those things where you feel like you're just in great hands.
And was there a specific training process in trying to sort of, I guess, learn to fly a plane the way Rosie and the other characters did it in the show?
Yeah, it would have been awesome to have like gotten to fly a real B-17, but there were only like four or five of them left on the planet. So and they didn't entrust just a bunch of actors to go up and man them. However, we got about as close to that as we was as what we possibly could. We had a couple military advisors, everyone down to like, so there's this guy called Dale Dye, who was he's an ex-Marine, and is kind of like the founder of military advisory in film and television. He worked on Band of Brothers and Saving Private Ryan, and we had all heard stories about him. And he led us through like a boot camp process where we all kind of like marched together and learned, sort of the rank and file and the order of what being on the base is like, how to treat your officers, things like that, how you show up every day, and sort of like what sort of like the tempo and the rhythm of the life of these guys was like. And then because so much of the show takes place in the air, we knew it would be really important to spend some time in these cockpits and learn where everything was, learn how everything operated, learn everyone's position. There's 10 guys per plane, right? So what are they doing, who does what, when did how do they communicate? And then for the guys playing pilots, well, the gauges, the switches, all this stuff, so that when it comes up, when we're shooting it, we know that we're reaching to the right places, and making it feel all just really connected, cohesive. It's
And were
amazing.
there, yeah, and were there any specific challenges in shooting some of the bigger action set pieces in the volume or elsewhere in the series?
I mean, there's at any given moment on that, we were in these replica cockpits mounted on these like hydraulic gimbals and these screens, and it was all connected, and you're being kind of like bounced around, and there's six different cameras, right, like just kind of mounted in and out. And just as like a technical process of like trying to these guys were so in control, and like my character was the kind of he was so amazing in his ability to just kind of like take charge in these moments of just incredible stress, and what was happening to the planes falling to pieces, and he was able to just to lead it back to safety. And like trying to maintain that sense of calm and focus in an environment like like that, and where we really tried to create the and or recreate the intensity of that. That was kind of the best and most challenging part, I'd say.
And your character gets introduced in the fourth episode after, I guess, the main story is pretty much established in the first three episodes. And it's interesting because you're like, Rosie's one of the most important characters in the series, and the audience quickly understands that fairly quickly as he gets introduced to the show. I'm wondering, like, how did you approach sort of Rosie's introduction scene for the show, and what did you immediately want to establish about him so that perhaps, an audience member who may not, know who he is go, oh, okay, maybe I should pay attention to this guy.
Yeah, I got to do this dance as my entrance for it. Um, and I remember reading that the first time, and the question that comes up is always kind of, like in the introduction of a character, like when we first see someone and how what do they say and what do they do, like that's really important because it kind of communicates to us as viewers like who they are and where we place them, where they're from. And I was like, oh man, like this guy's like dancing on his way in, and like it tells you a couple things. One, like he's this guy, he's kind of this, he loves music. He likes to like he's going up to his boys, like he's got this kind of like vibrancy to him. But at the same time, there's this kind of like, it's his first day, right? Like he doesn't know what he's in for, right? And he slowly throughout that episode and throughout the next episode, some of his first missions were the most intense of the whole experience. So that told me so much about like kind of like where I wanted to start off. And then that way as he spends more time on the base, goes through these missions, see what happens to the other men who are flying, then it kind of hopefully like it creates this sense of kind of like, oh, like no one can prepare, right? And for the audience maybe too, like a sense of kind of like, oh, tracking along, like what it would have been like. Yeah.
And in terms of establishing the dynamic that you have with the other cast members of the show, like how did that work out with the other cast members?
This show was unique insofar as the we were kind of separated by crews, right? Like each plane had its own crew of 10. And it just so happened that that's kind of the way we shot it because we were spending, weeks at a time doing a mission. And then, there's a chunk in the series where a bunch of us go to a flak house in sort of the middle of the series. And all those actors, I mean, we were just spending so much time with one another, and we got really close, and that's just something amazing that you can kind of just trust carries you into kind of the life on screen because you're already kind of like establishing that relationship. I was there were only like a few Americans on this project, and I remember when I got there, like I didn't know anybody. We shot it over the course of a year, so by the end of it, like we were all just super close. Just one of the best parts of getting to do this.
Yeah, and you're talking about the Flack House thing that was in episode 6, right?
That's right. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. So that's a pretty pivotal point for the character, in my opinion, for the understanding of the character, because after 3 missions that leave 120 men dead, Rosie is sent to the Flag House, and he keeps saying to the doctor that he's fine, but he can't sleep, and so they have this really interesting conversation. And I'm wondering if you could talk about that, how that scene was shot, how you perceive the character within that moment.
Yeah, it's funny when I look back at that. I was actually talking to somebody about this not that long ago. I was really anxious that day of shooting. I don't really know why. It was just kind of like a strange. Um, it just kind of like a strange day, and that scene is kind of about this sort of like inner like this just discomfort at being in this place where it feels like he was kind of like, oh, we like kind of just got going, like we just got back, and you don't really you don't want to be told to kind of step out of what you're focused on, because there's this kind of, for me at least, I felt like there was this kind of like fear that it would never come back, right? That like that you wouldn't be able to find the courage again, the kind of like fire, the rhythm that kind of like gets you back in there. And I remember that scene of just, feeling like just asking myself, like, what would it be like to like ask to go back to the base, and not really know where, not even really know where he probably didn't really know where he was or like who this doctor is. Um, and uh and then of course, the doctor says like, no, you should stay for a couple days. And it's like, okay, what am I going to do here? And of course it like leads into him kind of finding ultimately the reason that he's there. But yeah, that was an interesting scene. That was a great that was an amazing sequence to kind of like take a step away from sort of the world of the world in the plains and be kind of in the countryside of England all of a sudden. Yeah.
Is there a balancing act that you have to do as an actor when it comes to sort of, I guess, balancing out, the more heroic moments of Rosie's feats in the show versus his more intimate scenes?
It's funny. I think they're a little bit connected. I mean yeah, again, these guys, even in the moments of greatest courage for them, um, and especially for someone like Rosie, they were really just doing their job, and they really couldn't they really couldn't fathom, not being able to do their part. And when we kind of like got into sort of like what that part is, right, where you're not just like fighting, you're not just fighting the Nazis. You're not only protecting, the freedom, or the American freedom, or idea of American freedom, but it's also like you're fighting with these guys who you're with every day. Like they're the only people you have. And there's intimacy kind of inherent in that, right? Because it's like you're getting so close to the people that are also the people who are going to get you back. And so they're sort of tied together. Yeah. I never thought about it like that, but yeah.
Is there something that you understood more about the character when doing the scene in which he realizes that the requirements for the missions have changed from 25 to 30? Because he's about to leave, but there's this doubt that maybe perhaps I should stay for my team, and he does. Because 25
Yeah,
missions at the time was virtually impossible to complete. Sorry.
yeah, yeah. I mean, this happened a couple times throughout the war that the mission, the you know the maximum that the minimum requirement was upped. And obviously the kind of like the consternation, the like almost existential consternation that you would have about something like that. I mean, I was really happy that that scene was in there where we all learn about that kind of like at this bar at this like heightened moment together that it's getting that it's going up, because it gave me the chance to see it land on all these other actor right on all these other characters, and I think without that moment of kind of seeing, oh, like I could get off scot-free if I wanted to, but how am I supposed to deal with that if I can like see, with the knowledge of these guys, right in front of me who have to, serve another few missions. I think it was a really important scene to kind of carry into the latter half of it.
So in the final episode, Rosie's rescued by the Red Army, travels to Poland, and he encounters a concentration camp in which he directly sees the bodies of the Jewish prisoners who was in the camp. It's a very powerful and emotionally harrowing scene. I'm wondering if you could talk about shooting this particular moment in the show.
Yeah, it was an intense that was an intense one. I knew that was going to be an intense couple days. I sort of had prepared for a long time about, sort of Rosie's Jewish identity was such an important component to his sort of relationship to the war, and it's something that I kind of, had to explore for myself and my own sort of like the Jewish part of my family. And then, on the day of kind of like reckoning with this moment in Jewish history, right? Where what's really being asked of you isn't so much, like, oh, like it's a man who, walks through these camps, but he just didn't, nobody really knew or understood, like Rosie didn't understand what he was in for. So it's kind of this like loading up of sort of circumstances and a connection, like that personal connection, and then kind of like asking yourself, to just kind of like walk into the fire like that without any knowledge of what you're about to see. Um, and I just knew that I would probably, on that day just want to take some time and just sort of kind of like be kind of like isolated in myself from sort of like the chaos of the set, and just kind of like, just kind of be as present as possible. And everyone, I mean, that it was such a great crew we had. And Tim Van Patten, who directed that episode, is just brilliant. So it was kind of uh, it was amazing. It was very challenging, but also kind of a satisfying sequence to work on in that way.
And the conversation he has with Crosby as well at the very end was also a pretty powerful scene. I'm wondering if you could talk about how you sort of perceived Rosie through that moment after he went through basically a lot, and the war's over now. They're on the other side.
Absolutely. It's such a great scene. We sat down with John Orloff a couple days in advance of shooting that and kind of went over what that scene was going to be, and sort of worked out some different ideas for how we could play it, and what these guys might have said to each other. I think one of the reasons that scene really worked, for me, was because Crosby's kind of like, I'm about to have a kid, right? There's this sudden, very vulnerable element in the air, and then he doesn't. Crosby also doesn't know what Rosie just went through. So there's this kind of, they connect, and on these kind of like almost exactly the question you were asking before, of sort of like the intimacy, but also in the context of like this war where you have to like keep calm and carry on. And that scene, it sort of clarifies for Rosie, right? Like it's like, oh no, this is exactly the reason we need to fight. And yeah.
Is there something that you hope audiences get out of the story of Rosie as they watch Masters of the Air?
I think I think what really sort of amazes me about him as a guy, and like I still think about sort of the things he went through and the things he did, and I just am so in awe of him. Um, he was just brimming with courage, right? But also was a person who really led with warmth and care and kindness. And I think, we might have an idea about sort of like a hero being this kind of like stoic, sort of like nothing phases me, but at the end of it, like Rosie was a guy who's just, who cared about his men and the people around him. And maybe there's something to be said for that.
Absolutely. It was really great talking today, Nate, on a really great performance once again as Rosie Rosenthal on Masters of the Air. Congratulations once again.
Thank you so much, Max. Thanks for doing this.
Yeah, absolutely. I wish you all the best on your future project and hope that you have a very good rest of your day.
Thank you. You too, man. See
Thank
ya.
you.